Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. And a Happy New Year it is. Preview season in high gear, including our very own exclusive top-level preview.
Yeah, so we have I think we have a pretty hot one this time. It's sort of multiple different cycles. So, do you want me to do this one?
Why don't you tell them about this hot new legendary creature we got, Rishkar Peema Renegade.
All right, so Rishkar Peema Renegade is 2 and a G for a legendary creature, an elf druid, and he's rare. When Rishkar Peema Renegade enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures.
Right, which can... there's more?
There's more.
No! Wow!
Each creature you control with a counter on it has tap symbol, add G to your mana pool, and he's naturally a 2/2. All right, so you were going to say something awesome, I think.
Let's just, we're on the same page about this is just like a trained Armadon that's better in 9 different ways, right?
Well, I would have said a gnarled mass, but yeah, that's literally where my mind went, right? But I think that let's unpack that for a second. So if you've got nothing else, it's just turn 3 and you're playing Rishkar Peema Renegade, you can play it as a 2/2. Its ability to trigger +1/+1 counters happens. If you've only got one, which is Rishkar himself, you can put it on Rishkar, right? So even though he has the ability to put 2 +1/+1 counters, you can't. I don't think you can put them both on him. You have to put one on him only.
No, you definitely can't. It's up to 2 target creatures.
But
and it's put a +1/+1.
Yep.
Right.
But if you've got anything else, you can put one on anything else and then one on Rishkar, right? So you pointed something out to me, which was super interesting to me before we actually started rolling, which is the second line of text doesn't say +1/+1 counter. It says a counter, right? So if somebody has a -1/-1 counter or any other kind of counters on them, I don't know, from poison or something, infect rather, that creature, I think, gains the ability to tap for G.
It does.
That is interesting. All right, so among other things, right? So let's call Rishkar the world's greatest legendary gnarled mass to begin with, because at the very least,
more than Nissa or Glissa, I guess. Okay, so if you play Rishkar with this whole +1/+1 counter business, if you just have any other creature in play, you've gotten 4/4 worth of bodies already.
Oh yeah, just for 3 mana.
4, right, and that's not even counting the fact that you can give some of it is haste. You're spreading the power around, right? And then also, each creature you control with a counter on it has tap, add green to your mana pool. If you play a 1-drop on turn 1, a 2-drop on turn 2, and then Rishkar Peema Renegade, you can immediately tap both of those creatures and cast a 2-drop.
Yeah, like a Smuggler's Copter or something.
Right.
Which then you can crew, right?
You're accelerating so much.
Yeah, it's super powerful. In terms of its mana to output ratio, its rate is really, really interesting. In terms of both size and versatility. But
I mean, this card, it's a lot of body. It spreads out the power if you want. It can stack it a little. You can modify things with skills. If something has a keyword and you want to make it even better because it's has life, if it has any kind of life link type of business. And then this is an accelerator. This is so much utility, and that's not even getting into the combos outside of the self-contained ones.
So Rishkar is actually part of 2 different cycles. Right, so shout out to the Command Zone podcast. So we're putting this out on the 3rd of January. Command Zone podcast and Command Zone YouTube channel are putting out Rishkar's Expertise today, the 3rd of January as well. We have no idea what Rishkar's Expertise is. We just know that they're putting out the pair to this legend at the same time that we're putting out this legend, and we know that there's an expertise cycle, right? So there seems to be a legendary creature cycle, 1 per color, and then there's an expertise cycle that goes along with the legends. We've already seen Yahenni's expertise, right? So Yahenni's expertise was BB2. All the creatures get -3/-3, and then you can play a card that costs 3 or less for free, right? I'm guessing from that context that Rishkar's expertise is also going to have a similar mechanic to it. Not the -3/-3. It'll probably be a greenish thing, right? But then you're going to get the ability to play something for free.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if there's some +1/+1 counters going on in some way, given what the Renegade does. Like the Renegade himself is, you know?
Yeah, so we might have some additional clues, though, because of... Have you seen SRAM? SRAM, the Senior Edificer, and SRAM's expertise?
Yep. So
SRAM... so this was revealed on Daily MTG. I guess it's yesterday from when we're publishing standpoint. SRAM, Senior Edificer, is 1 and a white for a 2/2 creature, a legendary creature, Dwarf Advisor. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. So that could be a sweet card. But the only reason I mention it is because we've also seen SRAM is 2 white for a sorcery. Create 3 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So that's the only reason I was guessing, like that we might see a similar thing with Rishkar's expertise, because if we know that this is part of 2 macro cycles, that there's some evidence in that direction so far from Yahenni and SRAM.
So what do you think about this, like some of the interactions? Because this is one that it's already it's loaded with combos, right? Like it's just loaded with things you can do with it. For instance, if you play this with Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, Nissa, Voice of Zendikar puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. If you've got Peema Renegade, you can actually just make a ton of mana. All your tokens can make a ton of mana, even if something is summoning sick, right? So there's like a lot of explosive ability to ramp that way.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that, but you're basically building your own Cryptolith rights then, right? So if you've got like all these 0/1 plant tokens, and then you do the ability to give +1/+1 counters, and then you play this legend, then they can all tap for G, right? So those guys are, it's like, like a green, I mean, it's silly for me to say green Cryptolith rights, but you see what I'm saying, right?
So one of the things that's important to note is that your creatures are still summoning sick, right? Like that you make. So you don't get Earthcraft, but you're right, you do get Cryptolith rights because they have this tap ability. But one of the things that makes Nissa so elegant here is that normally the big cost to normally if you just put +1/+1 counters on all your creatures, you're losing 2 or more damage potentially by tapping them for mana. Nissa, Voice of Zendikar is one of the best ever sources of 0/1 tokens, so that there's a lot less missed damage when you're making all this mana.
Sure.
There's also, I mean, the +1/+1 counter stuff, it seems like it's pretty well supported in a variety of different directions that people go, like that you might go, like animation module from Kaladesh. Whenever a +1/+1 counter, whenever a creature is put under the battlefield under your control, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Oh, so sure. So what you're saying is that once we have a certain critical mass of cards that you can just start stacking +1/+1 counters without relying on any single piece, then your ability to design a deck to exploit this mechanic becomes much more consistent, right? And then once they're both going, then you've just won the lottery, basically. Like as long as they're both reasonable by themselves.
Well, and there are some potentially pretty explosive engines that are possible with some of the Kaladesh and Aether Revolt cards. Blake actually, his spoiler, or not spoiler, his preview, I guess, for Aether Revolt was a super exciting one, Metallic Mimic. And Metallic Mimic lets you so it's a 2/1 for 2 that when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and it's the chosen type in addition to all other types. And each other creature you control, chosen type, enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So if you have a Metallic Mimic, you can just put it's a 2/1 for 2 that you can just put down and name like Servos. And now whenever you play a Servos, it'll get a +1/+1 counter. So if you play an animation module on turn 1 and a Metallic Mimic on turn 2, if you just make a Servos in any way, every time you make a Servos or anything that has a counter, you can just pay 1 mana to make a 2/2. And if you have our Renegade, you can actually tap all your Servoses to make mana, like all your Servoses that are not summoning sick. You can tap them all to make even more Servoses, so that you're effectively doubling your army every turn.
So that's actually really interesting. The Metallic Mimic, I hate to say combo, right? The kind of synergy. It's reminiscent to me of Cavern of Souls in the Bant Eldrazi deck in Modern. Like, typically you name Eldrazi with it, but sometimes you name human.
Right.
So, like, the Metallic Mimic, I think that you're right. Maybe you're just going to build decks that say Servos. But what if you just say Elf, right? And then you cast our Legend right after the Metallic Mimic.
Yeah.
He's going to be even bigger, right? His rate is going to piggyback the rate of the Metallic Mimic. You're going to be able... Yeah, he's going to be a 2/1 to start. Then we're going to play our guy who's a 2/2. Our guy's going to come down as a 4/4. And then the Metallic Mimic's going to get buffed up to a 3/2. And then any future elves that we've got are going to have the bonus from the Metallic Mimic. Or can you say plant? Right? So if you go second turn Metallic Mimic into Nissa, like, the plants are all just awesome? Is that a thing? So
that's legal. I think the elf one is even more exciting, though. The fact that you can drop this, and then when you put down the Renegade, you actually can put a counter on the Metallic Mimic and a counter on the Renegade. So, like, already that's already 7 points of stats right there, and that's not even counting the fact that the amount of future value from your additional elves and any ramping that you're able to do.
Oh yeah, I kind of love that about both of those cards, which they're fairly unassuming for their cost to begin with. Like, one of them is just like a 2/1 for 2, which is, I guess, like, super not unreasonable. Our guy's a base 2/2 for 3, who's really a 3/3 for 3. But as long as as long as they don't die, they kind of snowball with value over time. But there are other elves, I think, that can piggyback on the synergies that we're talking about here, right? Even other elves from Aether Revolt.
Oh yeah, and I love how much you can use some of these elves that you might incidentally have. You may want to be attacking with them most of the time. Occasionally, you might want to do some explosive big mana turn. Like, if you just have a couple incidental elves, it makes it a lot easier to activate a card that's, like, take, for instance, Durable Handicraft. Durable Handicraft from Kaladesh costs just 2 mana and makes it so that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 to put a +1/+1 counter on it. Well, that's pretty sweet, because now all your creatures, you can pay 1 to make them into an accelerator. Plus bigger, obviously. But normally, Durable Handicraft doesn't cost that much to operate. You can put it down, and it costs a little bit each time you want to use it. But it has an ability of 5 and a green, sacrifice it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Having that expensive secondary ability, it's kind of nice sometimes to be able to just, even if you only have a couple of land, be able to make a big play like activating Durable Handicraft. And in this case, using, like, if you just miss one attack with a couple creatures, by putting a +1/+1 counter on everything, you might have so much mana from how much it's powering up your tokens that you're even further ahead.
Oh, that's interesting. it has like a pretty substantial, semi upfront cost, but you could just pay it back immediately. That's
right.
Yeah, that's rare in Magic, right? That you're gonna have that.
Another really interesting card to use in conjunction with the Renegade is Verdurous Gearhulk. I got to imagine that you're a fan of this one.
I mean, I'm a fan of anything that's Verdurous Gearhulk, but I when I think about Verdurous Gearhulk, I typically think about going tall, even though I know that it's the kind of card that can sometimes be very effective going wide. But I never really thought about you're like thing, our guy Verdurous Gearhulk, and then you're just like Verdurous Gearhulk, deploy 4+1/+1 counters, and then just like make another huge play. Like you
so it actually
do
works
two big
both
plays,
ways.
right? Like that's so interesting.
So there's a few different things you could do that are kind of fancy. One nice thing is you can just go Rishkar into Verdurous Gearhulk. Verdurous Gearhulk is a very, very effective 5-drop that appreciates being played a turn early. So if you actually play Rishkar on 3 and have a 2-drop in play, not only do you get to use Rishkar to ensure that you have Verdurous Gearhulk a turn early, but you also get to bash for all that extra damage by putting the +1/+1 counters on the creature that is still in play and didn't even have to tap to cast Verdurous Gearhulk. And even if you happen to miss, like you brick on land and you don't even have your 4th land, you still have the option to tap the other creature in play. And then, incidentally, you also get into these spots sometimes where Verdurous Gearhulk, you might actually drop Verdurous Gearhulk, put +1/+1 counters on all your different creatures, and then tap all those creatures to cast another Verdurous Gearhulk. And that's not even counting, I mean, obviously you're starting to get into some weird spots, but if you ever have something that lets you untap, like recently over the Mothership, they revealed the last couple masterpieces. And one of them, Paradox Engine, is a legendary artifact for 5 that makes it so that whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control. If you have Rishkar in play, that is a good sign that you might have a lot of creatures that can potentially tap for mana. And so if every time you cast a spell, you're untapping all those creatures again, you might be able to get into some like elf combo stuff.
Oh yeah, you're just like kind of storming it up just off the Paradox Engine. Kind of as many cards as you have in your hand, maybe you'll be able to just cast them all, right? Like, let's say you have, 4 creatures with +1/+1 counters, then you make a play that only costs 2, right? You can tap all 4 creatures, float 2, and then now you have 6, right? From just from
right.
You like net mana from casting the first spell, which I think is pretty interesting. The thing that's interesting to me about chaining Rishkar into Verdurous Gearhulk is that's not even the ambitious version, right? If you just go 3rd turn Rishkar, I have nothing else, hit my 4th land drop, Verdurous Gearhulk, that's a thing. But if you have anything to set up and then you don't even attack, you can leave a creature with a +1/+1 counter untapped, and then he could just be the Blossoming Defense if you need to. All right, I'm gonna be conservative on this turn, but he can be the Blossoming Defense. Or if you've got a Vigilant creature, there are all kinds of things that you can do that can be synergistic with the +1/+1 counters, the mana, and the size. That's like super exciting to me.
What do you think about Aviary Mechanic in a spot like that? Right, like if you have 2 Aviary Mechanics, for instance, you can actually just bounce them as much as you want. And as long as your Rishka, if you have a Rishka, anything, like basically if you have Rishkar, any one other creature that you put +1/+1 counters on, and then a Cultivator Caravan, you can make as much mana as you want. And those are like, we're talking about like reasonable cards. Like your deck might just have Cultivator Caravan in it and Rishkar in it without being all in on the combo. And if you get your Paradox engine, like maybe your deck just randomly has a Paradox engine so that you have the ability to backdoor the combo sometime. Like, it's kind of interesting, some of the backdoor looping that might be possible. What do you think about the possibility of just supporting some sort of a +1/+1 counter aggro strategy, like with Winding? Is it Winding Constrictor?
Oh,
Is that Marshall's card?
Yeah, Winding Constrictor was revealed by Marshall Sutcliffe on Limited Resources earlier this week. That's actually the one that is nearest and dearest to my heart right this second. When I saw Rishkar, I was thinking, oh wow, what if there was a what was the name of the enchantment that people built their decks around before that gave additional +1/+1 counters at like Pro Tour?
Right, Hardened Scales.
Yeah, what if there was a Hardened Scales? That would be so cool. So they actually gave us a Hardened Scales on a creature, which is Winding Constrictor, which is black and a green for a 2/3 creature, which is already an interesting rate. But then you have this additional text, right? If one or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many of those counters +1 are placed on that permanent instead. If you would get one or more counters, you get that many of those +1 instead. So if you play Winding Constrictor followed up with Rishkar, you're going to end up putting 2 counters on Winding Constrictor, right? So he's going to be a 4/5, and then Rishkar is going to be a 4/4 also.
That's a big start.
That's
already
crazy.
And you're not even trying.
No, yeah, that's just like Winding Constrictor is just like a good card if you're going to play with +1/+1 counters, right? Like that's just super solid. And a 2/3 for 2 isn't the worst thing in the world, but he has so much upside possibility. And you play him with this guy, and then I think there's just gotta be enough +1/+1 stuff in standard or playable formats that there's something to be going on here. I would just recommend that you don't play Winding Constrictor in Modern. I don't know, man. I know that it's not going to be very good against Infect. No, it's not.
But there's enough other synergies. I mean, you can actually do some pretty sick things once you get to a space of having 4 Hardened Scales and 4 Winding Constrictors. The ability to potentially do nutty stuff with like Arcbound Ravager. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I'm not sure. I'm not sure you don't want to be like there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of a sick combo there. But doubling back to Rishkar, what do you think about actually using Rishkar in Modern, in like an elf deck, right? Because like you can regularly use Rishkar as part of both. Like it's a double accelerator, including having virtual haste. So you can like turn 1 elf, turn 2 Rishkar, doesn't do too much fancy, but it gives you a lot of power, a lot of mana next turn. However, you can also, if you just are on some like normal type of time, you can be like turn 1 elf, turn 2 elvish visionary and another elf, and then Rishkar, and you've got tons of mana next turn. But it's also just really good for the backup plan.
Well, so I'd put it like this. When I think of elves, and I think of elves in a big format, Modern, extended, legacy type formats, I'm thinking about what's holding elves back in Modern from being really a top tier strategy. And I don't know that Rishkar is going to deliver elves in Modern to where I'm imagining it, where it is with Green Sun Zenith and where it was when LSV won a Pro Tour with it, etc. But I think that maybe there's a different elves deck that you could build with Rishkar. Maybe isn't about storming your way to a kill, but instead be like, here's a bunch of like medium good creatures. We don't get mana streak very often.
That's the most common form of elves these days, I think, is actually the collected company value elves.
Yeah, but it's like not that exciting. That's the thing, right? Relative to some other elf strategies. But I think
really, because this is like a pretty explosive way to help power out, activating some of your, activating Azuri or whatever.
No, yeah. What I'm saying is like, if you go deep into the +1/+1 counters on elves in Modern, then I think that...
Oh, no, I'm not even talking deep. I'm just talking about the card straight up by itself.
Just Rishkar.
So Rishkar.
I mean, you wouldn't want to add like Greenwheel Liberator?
That's a good point.
So here's the thing. So you want to talk about Greenwheel Liberator?
Yeah, so Greenwheel Liberator is an elf warrior for 1 and a green. You get a 2/1 that has Revolt of Greenwheel Liberator enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. This is Steve Rubin's preview card from yesterday over at TCG Player. Greenwheel Liberator is an exciting nuts and bolts sort of. I mean, it's like a 2/1 for 2. Obviously, you're a little behind, but at least it's like a good arrangement of stuff for when it fails.
Yeah, it's fine. It's you don't want it that way, but it's fine, right?
Right. Whereas, like, a lot of cards fail, and you end up with like a 1/1 where it's hard to make it do something. This one, a 2/1, at least a 2/1 is like a real game piece. And then when you successfully revolt, like if any permanent you control left the battlefield, then you get a 4/3 for 2 mana, and that's with good types because like there's elvish synergies to be sure.
Yeah, so it's so simple in Modern or any of these larger formats to crack a Wooded Foothills and then cast it into a Liberator. This guy's already Tarmogoyf range now, right? But he's awesome for nothing more than you would have done anyway.
And incidentally, she gives you +1/+1 counters in a way that you're not even like contorting around the +1/+1 counter theme. So like there will be times where like obviously you're not going to super plan on tapping your 4/3 in order to get extra mana. But there's going to be times where that extra mana is the difference between playing your 6-drop or not. Or if you have if you're playing like a standard deck using Winding Constrictor and Rishkar, then you can actually Greenwheel Liberator gives you another way to take advantage of the Winding Constrictor. You can actually just get you get a 5/4 instead. Like that's
yeah. So what I'm thinking of is I could just
turn's perfect, right?
Yeah,
turn 2 Winding Constrictor, turn 3 crack your Evolving Wilds and drop a Greenwheel Liberator.
I mean, if you want to just limit it to Modern for a second, just be like, look, I can imagine somebody easily going second turn Greenwheel Liberator with Revolt for double +1/+1 counters. Go. The opponent does something like cast a Tarmogoyf for a Grim Flare or something. Then you just play your third land and just say go. You do nothing, right? And you're in a spot where you would normally have a standoff situation. If you play Rishkar there, all of a sudden your Green Liberator gets bigger. You have Rishkar back. Maybe you do nothing, so you just don't attack. You leave it, and then you have Blossoming Defense or even Dismember mana open. But now, without hitting any additional land drops, you can go Collected Company. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I think that's born out of these new cards from Aether Revolt that can enhance the Elves deck in larger formats, right? That you're getting some additional mana acceleration. You're getting awesome-sized bodies, I think, for the mana, right? And you can pick and choose which Elves you want to play with.
Mm-hmm. How much are you leaning into the +1/+1 counter synergy? How much are you leaning into the elf synergy? There's a variety of options, and when you're dealing with cards that are as powerful at their baseline as Rishkar and Greenwheel Liberator, you don't always have to do that much work. Here's another one for you. In Standard, Oath of Ajani puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and Planeswalkers cost you 1 less to cast. So if you have Rishkar down and you Oath of Ajani, you can tap all your creatures and immediately drop a really expensive Planeswalker.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I hadn't even thought about the potential synergies between Winding Constrictor, Rishkar, and Oath of Ajani. Maybe the standard version of this deck is going to be full of Evolving Wilds and is Abzan in base colors, right? You want to do all these things, and there's tons of incentive from cards like Nissa to put +1/+1 counters from additional sources. Like we said before, you really get your legs as a deck designer when you get to combine cards like Winding Constrictor, Nissa, Rishkar, that are Oath of Ajani, that are all reasonable alone. But when you get to play them all together, then you're increasing the consistency of your theme, and then when you get any 2 or 3 of them together, it's like you won the lottery, right? I think that'll be really interesting because not only are you getting the +1/+1 theme, the double +1/+1 theme, the mana +1/+1 theme, but you have like a back door to mana for a big Planeswalker or some big play, or like an Emerge Overrun, something that's just way up the chain. Because these decks might not normally get to the amount of mana necessary to cast a 6-mana Planeswalker or a huge Emerge creature or something. But because of the... Yeah, but because you've got the Rishkar and you've got the ability to put a bunch of +1/+1 counters, you just have a new dimension to a deck that maybe has only 20 lands to it,
Is there any chance that you end up going all in with something like Armorcraft Judge, which is the 3 and a green for a 3/3 that when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each creature you have with a +1/+1 counter, or with a counter on it. So if you just have Rishkar all by itself, just Rishkar into Armorcraft Judge is a 1-2 punch, that if you had anything else in play to get a counter from Rishkar, you actually just get a 3/3 draw to. Like, you get a bigger Muldrifter for cheaper, and that's just with that. That's not even counting Rishkar. The big counters all your creatures.
I like that, but I think I like it as like a Mirror Breaker or a Stalemate Breaker. I think I'm less likely to like that in my main deck. I think I'm much more likely to want like a Decimator Prophet system, anything like that.
Because I could imagine you playing some kind of green-white deck, and maybe you'd splash back, but like, if you've got, for instance, Thalia's Lieutenant, there's a lot of good green ones. And Thalia's Lieutenant can, like, make sure that there's just +1/+1 counters everywhere. And Rishkar can make sure you've just got enough mana to do all the shenanigans where you're just taking advantage of the fact that Armorcraft Judge just drew you tons of cards. And some of the humans interact with +1/+1 counters anyway, like Tireless Tracker,
Oh, yeah. Tireless Tracker. What happened to that guy? He was all over the world a year ago, and now he's just kind of quiet.
Hangs out sometimes. He hangs out once in a while.
He'll be back.
Yeah. So anyway, super exciting. So I got a feeling we're going to be talking about Rishkar in a variety of contexts over the next lots of time.
And we'll be talking about more Aether Revolt, I don't know, later this week. So this is a bonus episode. We'll be back on Thursday with our regularly scheduled episode. I'm Michael J. Flores.
I'm Patrick Chapin. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredges for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind.